Today is October the 12th, 2023. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. And along with me today is Ben Pollard, a retiree of the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. We're in Wagoner, Oklahoma to speak with Paula Templeton regarding her long career in conservation with the Wagoner County Conservation District, 1977 through 2016.
Correct.
Today's interview will be part of our Oklahoma's Conservation Heritage Oral History Project, which is a collaboration between the Oklahoma Conservation Historical Society, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. So thank you for talking with us
You're
today.
so welcome.
Before we get into your conservation aspects of your life, let's learn a little bit about you. Start wherever you like.
Ooh, me. I was born March the 20th, 1950 in the Choska Bottoms of Coweta, Oklahoma, which is about 15 miles from here. And I can remember my mom telling stories that the Choska Bottoms, when I was born, she would sweep and 30 minutes later she needed to sweep again because the dust was so bad. It was sandy soil and it would just blow, and we lived in an old house, or they did. So I was kind of raised around here all my life. I graduated from Wagoner High School. I moved over here when I was 2 years old and attended high school, went to NSU till I was silly and got married and quit college, a big mistake. I say that because as I worked with the Conservation District and NRCS or SCS, I would see these people come in and I'd think, gosh, if I'd have finished my degree, I'd be making 3 times what I'm making. So I look back on that and think, what a mistake. But anyway, I got married, and out of that marriage, I had a great son who is now 50 years old. And I was working at the Corps of Engineers in Tulsa, and a friend of mine said, hey, there's going to be an opening at the Conservation District. And the way she knew was because Yule Lancaster was the chairman of the Conservation District, and he was her boss at the insurance company. And she said, you might want to apply for that. And I said, oh, I do, because my son's just starting kindergarten, and I was a single mom, and I thought, I don't care what it pays. If I can be home near my son and go to his little parties, I'm going. So I went down and interviewed, I believe just with Mr. Lancaster, if I remember correctly. And he said, you're hired. And I said, yes. So I started to work on March the 14th of 1977. And I started making, my report says I made $4.23 an hour, half time for the Soil Conservation Service. And I was half time with the Conservation District. And I truthfully don't remember what the Conservation District paid me. But it wasn't any more than that $4.23 an hour. I was tickled to death. I had some benefits of annual and sick leave. I didn't have retirement. I didn't have any other insurance benefits. But you know, I didn't care. I was home and I was close to my child. The farming that I knew, my mom married my stepdad when I was 18. And he farmed in the Choska Bottoms. He had 160 acres there, and then he had 160 acres up north of Coweta. And up north of Coweta, he had cattle, and out down at the other in Choska, he had soybeans and wheat. And so I kind of got acclimated to a little farming through my stepdad. I could tell you funny stories about that. But anyway, that's how I got started, and I was thankful that I knew a little knowledge about coming to work for those agencies. Other than that, that was all the sense I had about soil and water, truthfully.
Had you driven a tractor?
Never.
Okay.
Never drove a tractor. But during this little career with the Conservation District, I learned to drive trucks, haul equipment, take out phone poles because I wasn't a good driver with equipment. We had a dairy lagoon pump out program, and they needed somebody to drive a truck and pull the equipment. And I said, I'll do that. So not knowing what the heck I was doing. And they said, now make a wide turn. And I saw a piece of line go down, and the guy, he's, keep going. He said, don't stop, just keep going. You know, he told me, and I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. So I learned a little bit about that during that time.
What were some of your original duties?
You know, payroll was one, and payroll was totally different for NRCS, or Soil Conservation Service at that time. It was like 4 copies. You had a white copy, a pink copy, I think it was blue or green, and a yellow. So if you made a mistake, you had to have the little bottles, white out, yellow, white out, blue, white out. So whenever somebody would change their mind about payroll, I was not a happy camper. They would come in and say, oh, I've decided I'm going to take off Friday. And I'd say, no, you're not. And they said, yeah, I am. I said, no, you're not. And I'll never forget, we had a young soil con. Her name was Debbie Speak. And she dated Mike Siner, the congressman, so she felt pretty important. And so she came in one Friday and she said, I am taking off. And I said, you're not. I said, I've already done your payroll, and I'm not doing that thing again. I hated that payroll. And she said, Paula, I am. And I pushed her up against the file cabinet and said, no, you're not. And Alfred Thompson, he was our soil con. And he went, whoa. He said, Paula. I said, oh, I guess I'll do your payroll. I was so mad, but I did it. So that was one thing. The other thing we had was an electric typewriter at that time. And I was so happy because it had correction tape. And I thought, I am in big town now. I don't have to use whiteout. It did it for me. And then we had a copier. And, you know, we didn't have a copy machine. We just typed with copy paper. And all of a sudden they brought me a copier machine. It wasn't as big as this piece of paper probably, but you'd have to put a piece of pink paper in before you could send your other paper. I didn't care. It took time, but I didn't have to use that carbon typing paper anymore, so I loved it. That was some great things. But I did payroll for both. I would help write. I did not write. I put together their conservation plans. I'd answer the phone, and it was very, very important at that time that you keep a list of all the district cooperators, and they were put into a group. When you wrote a plan, they were in like group 1 through 46, depending on where their section of their land was. And we had this huge map. It's still in here in this office. And you would go in and color in their little deal, whether they were in the watershed or they were outside of the watershed. And you would put their plan number and their name so that when we wanted to go find them, we just looked at that big old map and we could find it. And I'll never forget those plans, I were told, they belonged to the Conservation District. Leroy Tull was the what was his title? He was the area conservationist. That's right. And I liked all of these people. It was like family to me. But Leroy came in one day, and I don't know what got in his head, but he told me that those conservation plans, we did them alphabetical. We did them numerical. That way, you know, everything was in order. He came in and said, they're going to be alphabetical. Or the reverse. Anyway, I said, no, sir, I'm not doing that. He said, yes, you are. I said, Mr. Tull, I'm not. He hit the file cabinet and he said, you are. And his face was beet red, and I said, I am. So I took all those home with me. Probably should have never left the office, but I took them home with me on the weekends, and I would redo that list, and I'd put new labels, and I was just cussing Leroy Tull the whole time I was doing it. Not really. But you know, that wasn't something I expected to do. And then they came back and said, put it back the other way. And I said, I am not doing it. So they're like they were. So those were some of the things that we had to do. And the mail, I'll never forget, whenever I first started, you didn't get mail at the office. It was at the post office. And the first day, probably the first day I started, Paul Hamilton, he was my district conservationist. And when I came in, their door was shut. So the lady that was at Farm Home, Elvira, she said, just take a seat over there. I said, yes, ma'am. So I went and sat down in a chair and waited. And finally, Mr. Hamilton opened the door and he said, "Are you Paula?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, what are you doing out there?" I said, "She told me to take a seat." He said, "Get in here." And I went in there and he said, "Ignore her." He said, "Sometimes she's not very nice." I said, "I could tell." So he said, "Otto, you take Paula and show her the mailbox and the combo, how to do the little twist and turn." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I sure will." Well, Otto was the equipment manager, and Otto, oh, he seemed old, like I'm old, but I was 27, he was probably only 40, but he seemed old. And so he said, "Come on." He took me in the district's pickup. And we got down there, showed me how to do it, got the truck, come back, and he said, "I want to sing you a little ditty, okay?" And I said, "Sure." I'm thinking, I don't know what a ditty is, but sure. He said, "One of these days, it won't be long, I'm going to call on some of that stuff you're sitting on." Oh, I thought, I can't believe he said that. I didn't say another word. Got back to the office and I said, "Mr. Hamilton, I will never go with him anywhere again." He said, "What happened?" I said, "He wasn't very nice." He said, "What did he do?" I said, "He sang me a little ditty." He said, "Otto, get in here." Otto went in there. He said, "What'd you sing to her?" "Well, I just sang her a little bitty song. I didn't mean nothing by it." Now I look back, I could have filed charges against him for sexual harassment, but I loved him. Otto became my bestest bud. And I thought that was just his personality. He did not mean it. But I'm just saying that was my first day on the job. And then the lady who told me to go have a seat, they had just moved into the first ever open office with Soil Conservation Service, the Agricultural Stabilization Conservation Service, and the Farmers Home Administration. And so it was all open. And I guess that was something new to everybody because it was the first one in Oklahoma. And so you heard everything everybody was saying. And the lady that was in the FHA office, if she liked you and she didn't want you to know anybody's business, she would whisper like that. But if she didn't want you, you're going to pay that house payment or you're going to be living in your car. That's what she would tell them. And I would be big-eyed because I'm thinking she's fixing to tear into them. So you learned to be careful when Don Harkey one time, he was in the ASCS office and the FHA people were gone. And the man came in and needed a file for insurance. And Don said, "Paula, just get that file." And I was still new. So I get up and go in her folder, get out that file and lay it on her desk with that note from the insurance. She came back from that meeting and I said, "Elvira, mistress, don't you ever get in my files. Do you understand that?" And I said, "Mm-hmm." She said, "I mean it. Don't you ever come over here and get in our paperwork." Well, Don Harkey set me up. He knew how she was. So I got a welcoming real quick. And from then on, I knew how to handle myself. But it was a fun day. But that was about my first week of employment.
It sounds like most of the women were the helper bees. And
that's what we were.
And the men were in charge.
Yes, ma'am. You're right. Yeah. You're right.
And did that change at some point?
It did. Like Miss Speak, when she came, she had a different personality, and she would kind of override those men with what they were saying or doing. So, yeah, it eventually changed. And I got a great, I had Paul Hamilton first for my district conservationist. I had Leonard Solomon, was the head of the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. And then after Paul Hamilton, I had Jerry Walker. He was my district conservationist. And then after that, I received Greg Kendall. And so Paul was there for several years. Jerry wasn't there that long, maybe time goes fast. But then I had Kendall, and he was probably there 20-something years with me. So we were just like family. Everybody, I called him my work husband. I called Brian Heisey when he came my work husband at ASCS. So you get close to people. And I still have friends. I still talk to the ladies I worked with. They're just good people. But Mr. Solomon was the head of the commission when I started. And I started out what they called a Secretary 1. And I got a letter of reduction back in, what did I tell you,
88, I think.
It was something, it was just telling me that they were going to have a reduction in force and that I was no longer going to be needed by the Soil Conservation Service. I wanted to cry because I had some benefits from them. And when I started, I thought it said that I worked from 8 o'clock till noon for the Soil Conservation Service. And I remember asking Mr. Hamilton, do I not speak to you or do anything with the district till after 12? How do I work? He said, just do what you have to do. I said, okay, I just don't want to get in trouble. Well, after I'd worked there, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years, Leonard Solomon came and he said, I'm going to take you up here and we're going to have a cup of coffee. I said, I don't drink coffee. He said, well, we're going to go have something. We're going up to this restaurant where we can talk. I said, okay. And I remember he was such a nice fella. And he said, Paula, I want you to change your title from secretary to a district manager. That was the word. And I said, what's that going to make me do? He said, you're going to get more money. And I said, do I have to change duties? He said, no, you just need to become the district manager. Tell your board. And he said, we allocate more money to that position and you're doing the work. I didn't do it. I was scared I'd lose my job. I didn't want to ask the board anything because I thought, I'm not, even though he was the boss, I thought, I'm not doing anything to that board. So I didn't ever change that position, probably for 20-something years. And they came up with a title called Programs Coordinator. I said, I'm taking that one. I'm doing that job. And I got some more money. So that was a good thing. And then I really did have great bosses as far as board members. George Stunkard was on the board when I came, and Ewell Lancaster. And then Dan Robertson came on the board, who had been a former district conservationist before I came in. So he was one of my board members. And Floyd Young, who eventually he went off of the board, became a district manager equipment-wise, then went back on the board. He was one of my board members. And a guy named Mark Bethel. And Mark had worked for Farmers Home for years. And he retired and he went on the board. So I had a great boss all along. And then George Stunkard, he just received a 50-year pin at our state meeting for serving the good old Conservation Commission and districts. And so I could have never complained about my board members. They were all awesome. When I first started, I did not think about minutes. I had never taken minutes. So I'd type them up, and it's on an electric typewriter. I'd type them up, and I'd take them down to Mr. Lancaster at his office, and he would read them and give me the okay. Or if I didn't do something right, then I had to come back and type them all over again. But, he was guidance. That board really did guide me. Well, I went on the board here in 2019, and I remember how I used to gripe at my board because I think, y'all don't do jack. You don't help me. I get this long-range plan. It's a nightmare. And where are you guys? Well, they didn't know anything. They weren't going to help you. So luckily, Lisa Knopf, Ben Pollard, Dan Siebert, and those people at the commission, they would help you. But now that I'm a board member, I know time is so valuable. They were farming. They were raising a family. Mm-hmm. They wanted to help you, but they didn't have as much knowledge for paperwork. So I'm learning why they weren't there. It kind of gives you a new perspective on why, So I learned that. But during that time of my career, when I first started, we were doing conservation plans. Conservation plans, they would go out and see the farmer, and they would come back and they would write down a 102 on their payroll. A 102 was the initial contact with you. Then I would put that in their plan that we went out. We had a Con 6 note, and they still use those today. They would write what they did at Mr. Jones' farm, okay? And we would put that in the folder. Then they would go out the next time to see Mr. Jones, and they would get a 104 on their payroll because they started a project. Okay, then next time they went to see Mr. Jones, if he had finished that pond, that guy would write on his payroll 106 because he finished the pond. That practice was completed. And so we also, even back then, I guess it was the Civil Rights Act of probably 1964, they had, we had to treat everybody equal. We couldn't treat anybody wrong. So we would have a code for, like, a man was a 1, I think, black was a 4, Native Americans had a code, but we had to mark that on their card so that we knew we were servicing everybody equal. Well, one time, this was after I was full-time district, we had a gentleman in the county that he felt like that he was being discriminated against, and I won't call any names because everybody already knows who it is. So anyway, he said that he was being discriminated. So when I heard he was going to be coming to our office, I was thinking, holy moly, I don't want to intervene with him. Well, sure enough, he walked right in my office, introduced himself, and began to tell me he was discriminated against. And I said, you know what? I am too. I'm white. I'm single. I totally get what you're going through. He never come to see me again. That ended it. But he kept coming to see the rest of them. And he was bringing, the next thing I remember about him, they brought in a group of people from Washington. So they flew them from Washington. They housed them. They spent a lot of money for one individual who was saying he was being discriminated against. And I remember Greg Kendall going to see Sherrod Parker, who was half black, half Native American. Loved him. He eventually served on our board. And I remember Greg going to see him and saying, we're having to visit with all of these black or Indian, Native, whatever you want to call them, people, to see if you're being discriminated against. And Sherrod Parker said, I tell you what, if I am, I'll come tell you. I'm tired of you coming to see me. He said, I'm wore out on you people questioning me. He said, if I have a problem, I'll come tell somebody. So it got to that point. But those people all flew in from Washington. They paid for hotel and everything. And they told us we had to tell. I think we had to invite 5 farmers that they wouldn't know why we were asking them. You couldn't tell them that. It was just that we needed them to come in and visit with some people. And we had to invite blacks and women. And so they all came in. And I remember to this day, the lady that they asked was Mary Hall. And Mary Hall came in, and our walls were thin. They had paneling. And I thought, I'm going to try that glass trick. So I put that glass up. I'm nosy. So I put that glass up there because I wanted to hear what was going on. And they said, yes, do you know this gentleman? No, they didn't. I take that back. They started out, do you ever feel like you're discriminated against? And she said, well, no. She said, these people are all nice to me. They've helped me on this and this. And finally, after about 5 or 6 questions, she said, what is this really about? And they told her the gentleman's name. And she said, let me tell you about him. He gave us a hot check for hay on a Friday night. So you couldn't get your money till Monday, and it was hot. He did that to an elderly woman and took hay that same weekend and we went to the DA, and they said, you can't get it. It was a big old harass. She said, don't you ever call me in here again for anything like this. Said, I will not come. These people are good to me, and that man's trouble, so no, don't call me back. And that was the end of it. And then I think he has continued, but he left us alone for a while. So that was good. And let's see, I had a woman one time when I was pretty new. I knew we had done watersheds. And when I came into the office, we were building watersheds. I made myself a note. Watershed Site 3 was just being sprigged. And watersheds are to catch any runoff water to keep our fields from flooding. And so they were just starting that process. And number 4 was going to be completed in a week. Site 2 was under condemnation. And plaques were being installed on Site 6 that it was being completed. And so we had 5 watershed sites and 2, well, really 6. We had 6 watershed sites and 2 channels. And that was the thing that was going on when I first started. And so I knew watershed. I had that in my mind, Cadishan watershed. And this lady walks into our office, and it's open, remember. She goes over to the lady at the ASCS desk, and she said, I want to see those SOBs that are building those watersheds. And I was all by myself. Nobody was on my side. And I thought, ooh, she's going to come over here. Phyllis Redfern was the ASCS lady. She said, now what was your name? Just as calm, you know. And I'm thinking, that lady's mad. She told her. She said, I told you I want to see those SOBs that are, and I'm thinking, oh God. I get up very quietly and I make my way through the hall closet to the kitchen, and I hid under the kitchen table. I thought, because she's going to kill somebody. So in a minute, she starts in again, and Phyllis says, ma'am, what was your address and phone number? And I'm thinking, Phyllis, you're staying so calm, and this woman's radical. And she stopped, gave her address, gave her phone number, and she said, well, we will have somebody call you as soon as they come in. There's nobody over there right now. And I thought, you're right about that. I'm gone. And she gave her a number, left. That night, she was on the news. She had been arrested at Montgomery Ward for doing something too. But I came out of there and said, Phyllis, I'm so sorry. And I sure do thank you, because I thought I was going to be dead. So that was my other new experience. So some people weren't happy about the watersheds, but most people were very excited because it was going to save their crops. So that was the thing we were working on, conservation plans, doing pasture establishment, and our district was planting Bermuda grass. And that's what Otto Longhorn's job was. And I learned you plant 15 to 20 bushels to the acre. And he had an old Sprigger. I think we had 2 or 3 2-row Spriggers that we would rent out to the farmer, or he would do custom work. When I started, we only had we were probably rich because we had 2 $5,000 CDs, but we only had like $2,300 in our checking account. So we didn't have much operating money, but the district had been able, it was formed in 1938, and they, through those years, had made enough that they bought the equipment to help the farmer. Later on, we had a gopher killer. I didn't have a clue what a gopher killer was, but it goes behind the tractor, it makes a little furrow and puts poison bait and kills all those gophers that were tearing up the farmer's land. And we had that until some farmer lent it to another farmer, and it got lost in the county somewhere. And so we learned then that we needed a deposit on our equipment so that it wouldn't get lost. And then we later bought a no-till drill to help the farmer as no-till farming came into place, and the board bought a no-till drill to help the farmer. But they were planting grass, they were doing wheat, and mainly agriculture, soybeans. They had cattle, and so the guys were mainly doing planting, ponds, critical area treatment was one of the big things they worked on. Fencing wasn't as popular back then as it is now. That wasn't one of their real programs. But the guys did a radio program, and it was ASCS and Greg with SCS. They would do a radio program. They'd do it on fall planting, spring Bermuda grass planting. They just had all kinds of little, and I was so excited about that because they were recorded in the office on an old 8-track type player. I got to take it to the radio station. So I got to leave the office and I would go and deliver it to the radio station. But they did that every week. Well, they would put on their little radio deal that they wanted people to call in and ask questions. Well, they weren't getting any calls. So I became Peggy Ramsey and I would call and ask questions to them while they were on the radio. And they said the first caller would get a 2-quart bottle of Coke. And so I called in and they said, oh yes, Miss Ramsey, you have won a 2-liter bottle of Coke. So Greg came back and I said, where's my pot? He said, what? I said, where is that 2 liter of Coke? Well, Paul, I was going to take it back. I said, you bring me my 2 liter. I said, I did what you asked. So that was my experience with that. But they were also doing bank stabilization. They had a lot of programs they were doing, you know, to get people involved in conservation. And farmers would come in, and our conservation board was doing a soil stewardship breakfast when I was hired. And it started in a cafe, and they not with me, but years back, they had started, and they probably didn't have maybe 10, but it was mainly for ministers. And it was to get the soil stewardship message out there that he would preach. We had a little book we would give them to guide them in bringing a message about being good stewards of the land. Well, it grew from that to inviting businessmen, legislators, and I think the largest one we ever had was probably 130 people. And I remember the Starlight Extension Club. That was a group of women through the OSU Extension. They called themselves the Starlight Extension Club. They would cook the breakfast at a church, and we would have a guest speaker. I mean, we had some Mr. McSpadden. I mean, we had good speakers. They charged us $2 a plate. Whenever I came, my first one, it was $2. You got sausage, biscuits, gravy, scrambled eggs, orange juice, and coffee for $2. Well, when I quit, it was up to 10 something a plate. So that just showed me the difference. But we still had a good crowd, and we did not do it during COVID, but we're going to start back this year doing it. Another program we had was the Bankers Award Program. And so it was my job to go to all the banks and ask them if they would sponsor our awards program. And they said, wow, we love that idea. So we would do it like at a OOHRP school. We tried to move it in the county so that different farmers would be able to make sure they could come. And we would award a Conservationist of the Year. And then those Conservationists of the Year, Ben? Oh, the Conservationist of the Year, they would be given a plaque and a big to-do, and we'd have a speaker, and it was a big deal. But now they don't do that anymore. Another thing we did, we would do the Goodyear tire and rubber. And that Goodyear tire and rubber, we had a winner, Jack Carter, from over in the Cattashan watershed. He actually won. And I want to say he got to go to Hawaii. I'm pretty sure. And then we had we did the Bankers Award, we did that, Conservation Outdoor Classrooms came through. And we worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And they had a deal that if you would build an outdoor classroom, they would supply you with some funds. And so you would go to the school and you'd write a 10-year agreement. And that conservation education was fun. And it got me out of the office. It got me a relationship with business people as well as farmers. And when it's for kids, people will bend over backwards to help you. It's just totally different. So my first one was OOHRP. And I met with John T. Aldridge. He was big in doing it. He loved it too. And we had a plan to build little gazebos. The kids could sit in there. They built benches. I get local people at OOHRP, Wagoner, Porter, they would donate their time. And they built the gazebo. We had a guy that would build the pond. A dozer operator would donate his time and build a pond. And so many education classes could be taught outside instead of the classroom. They could do math. And we had programs called Project Wild, and I think Project Learning Tree was the other one. And they would give us books that we could take out and educate. Sometimes we would have like presenters come, and we'd have a field day, and the teachers loved it because they didn't have to do anything that day. Some of them would sunbathe. But we would do we'd have beaver trapping come, and they would show us skins and skulls from the wildlife department. We would have somebody do mapping for the kids to let them see how we found farms on the maps. We would have the fire department, the ambulance, we would have the nature center come and bring snakes and stuff for the kids to actually hands-on. And it was, everybody would rotate through those classes. We'd have lunch, and different presenters would come from different agencies to do the work. And it was just a good time for the kids. One, I had it, before we built the outdoor classroom, I had one out at Western Hills. And we had all the booths set up for the kids to go through. And all of a sudden, this guy comes running to me and says, and one of them had brought chickens. The FFA kids had brought chickens. They got loose. That was the first thing that happened there. Then all of a sudden, I hear screaming. One kid had on some boots and had kicked the dirt, and there was bees in the ground. It got one, the one that came to me had one in her nose. They got in one kid's pants. They were screaming. I didn't have any medical there. I didn't think about medical at that time. That was about my first or second one. They loaded up some and took them to the hospital. And one on her way kept screaming, and hers was in her sweatpants. She couldn't get her pants off, in front of everybody to get the bees out. So that was a learning experience to have somebody there that knew first aid. Everybody survived, but that was an experience. The chickens, I think they're probably still out there in Sequoia County somewhere. But those were fun times. The kids loved it. And I have kids to this day, adults, say, I remember doing the outdoor classroom. The one at Coweta, the school began to grow. The baseball field took over. But those people were so good to donate time. We built one at OK, same way. It lasted. They used it. Wagoner. The gazebo still stands at Wagoner. But they don't do the outdoor classroom anymore. If you don't have a teacher interested, it won't survive. It's sad, but it doesn't. And I was trying to think of some more programs we did. We had a lot of fun. I'll tell you this story. We had two Lakes RC&D was going on. And then we also had the RC&D, which was Resource Conservation and Development. And our board joined that. And they sent one representative from our board to attend their meetings. And it was a locally led, but sponsored by the Department of Ag. But it was locally led, locally solved problems. A lot of it was on the Illinois River. And that was a great program. And we stayed into that RC&D. It was in Tahlequah. And I think there was 9 counties, if I remember, involved. And we stayed until the very end. And it finally went down. And when it did, all the money they had, if you had kept paying your dues to them, then you got a portion of of what they had accumulated. We were really happy. We're rich. Not rich, but blessed. Yeah. So that was a good thing. And then I had a young guy named Tony Kai. He worked for us as a student trainee. And this is just a funny story. He was excellent. He ended up going on to bigger and better things. But I'll never forget one day Tony came to work and he said, well, I was here early. He went home, went to bed, fell asleep. His alarm went off at 6, which was, he had messed up. He got up, got dressed, came to work and saw the sun going down. He realized he had messed up. But that was a funny story for him. But the next thing, after we did the watersheds and we did just conservation on the ground, then we started doing HEL, highly erodible lands. And I remember Greg Kendall, Floyd Young, our equipment manager, he loved to tell jokes. And he always had a story. And I can't remember who came to help Greg. I can see him, he was at Stillwell. Anyway, Floyd said, hey, I want to tell you a story. And the guy said, listen, if it's one of your long ones, I don't have time. This HEL is kicking our rear. I got to get this done. Because we had the second, well, I think we had 1,550 acres or something like that that was all in highly erodible lands. And so they were doing those plans and determining if they were highly erodible, and everybody was crazy at that time. Then comes along I guess that was part of the Farm Bill. And so that was keeping them busy. Then come along CRP, Conservation Reserve Program. And so they started working on that. And it was like, it didn't matter. There was always a new program coming. And they were reorganizing our offices. that we weren't going to have a area conservationist anymore, and we weren't going to have it was going to all revamp. And during my time, they revamped it, and guess what? It came right back like it was from the very beginning. I thought they just needed something to do. Don't tell them. I guess you weren't going to tell them I said that. But that was part of it. And I'm trying to think of other things we did. We did land judging.
Mm-hmm.
And our kids at school and 4-H, we would invite them and we would do a land pasture and range judging contest. We would go out and find a farmer that would let us use his land according to our mapping that had the different kind of soils. They'd go out there the night before and dig trenches and pray it didn't rain and fill up the holes. And if they did, we had a coffee can to dip the water. And then those kids, if they won, we gave them prizes, and then they would move on to the next contest. We did that for many, many years. And then we did poster, essay, and speech contest. You talk about some good speakers. We had some good speech contestants. We are still doing the poster contest. It's unfortunate because when you go to a school now, you cannot go into the school. You have to go to the board. The board gives you approval. It's whether you can go see the superintendent if he wants to participate. And so we are, but we only have one school that is participating, and that's Porter. But we reached out to all. But they're all so busy with everything that's not something that they're crazy about.
When you say we, meaning you or a particular person?
You mean going to them?
Yeah.
Our what do I call her? Our programs coordinator goes to the school. Yeah. Now we judge them. We just did it at the last board meeting, and it's fun to see what those kids come up with. And the theme this year was one water, and I said, "What's that mean?" Because I'm thinking one water. But they drew pictures of like soil, and then they had a little stream going through it. And it was just, I think, showing that everything revolves around that water. And I'm real impressed that the schools, I have a little 6-year-old granddaughter, and she catches me, and I know better, running water. She'll say, "Grandma, turn that water off." She said, "We don't have a lot of water. We have to." And I'm thinking, they're still teaching it, or she wouldn't be at 6 years old telling me to turn the water off. So that makes me proud. We also did waterways. We did terraces. In 1978, we had 78 ACP from ASCS office was sent over to us. That was ponds, terraces, waterways. So that kept us busy going out to the farmers doing that kind of things too. That we also went to the Tulsa State Fair every year. And I'm not sure, we did a scrapbook contest. And I'm talking, that scrapbook was this big. I think we got to carry that big old thing. But we would put every news article we did, any conservation work that was really not something important, and it was big old black sheets, and you would take it to the fair, and they would judge them. And I think it was the Oklahoma Press Association that actually paid for our luncheon at the Tulsa Fair. I'm talking 200-300 people would be there from conservation districts. And I don't know why it quit. Probably it got costly. But we always had like a Salisbury steak and mashed potatoes and gravy and green beans, and we all had fun. And then we got to go to the fair, and we didn't have to pay anything to do it. So I've never forgotten that. I miss that. And we also had an Alice Chalmers contest where we would enter that with a farmer, and I don't remember what the award was. And we had a stewardship program, and we did have a winner on that, and that was a gentleman named John Duncan. And they had owned the Duncan department stores, and then it became Dillard's. But Mr. Duncan had a farm here in Wagoner. Everybody loved Mr. Duncan. He was just a good rancher, farmer. He had a hired hand, Courtney Bennett, that helped him. But the thing I remember about Mr. Duncan, he came in one day and he handed me a coin. And I said, "What is this?" And he said, "Well, I want you to know I used to be an alcoholic. I'll always be an alcoholic." But he said, "I overcome." And I thought, that just shows you. So it was good. the scrapbook contest. Oh, and when I started, district directors for per diem got $15 a meeting. And that went on for years. Finally, it went to $25 to be a board member, but you had to attend or you didn't get that money. And then we went busted at the commission, I guess, and they quit giving any monies for attending, so it was strictly volunteer. So these people that come, not just in Wagoner, but every conservation district, they have to love farming, ranching, and really care because they don't get any benefit. It's all free. But now we're getting $75, I think it is, every quarter we get back. We're back on because we're taking it out of our local funds that we've raised doing Bermuda grass breeding, renting no-till. So we kind of got it back. So I talked about the poster contest, the long-range plan. That was something I got when I first came about that too. It was a 5-year plan, and everybody goes, oh no. And guess what? It's that time again. And every 5 years, we have to plan out what we hope to be able to do in 5 years and make us a little thing to follow. We already have an annual plan, and we have a joint plan that we do with NRCS and district, or commission, whatever we want to say. Anyway, so we are all covered. I'm telling you, we know what we're going to do for the rest of our lives when we come in here. I worked with so many great people. I look back at like Doc Coker. I could name all the names, but I'd miss somebody. And at the commission, they had Adeline Laird when I started. Adeline Laird was an accountant for the commission. But you talk about wanting to help you. She would do anything in her power. But I do remember, if you messed up, you would get that OSF3 back, and it would have a big old red circle. And I thought, I'm not getting any more of them. So, boy, I double-check everything because I didn't want to get in trouble. Also, I learned that if one district secretary messed up, you're all going to pay the consequences. Because and so I would say, well, that's not right. I didn't do that. Well, they did, so now everybody's going to. I remember, I won't call names, but there was a secretary that I looked up to so much. She always looked like she had just came out of a department store, dressed to the top, shoes, hair, and I'm not like that, okay? So, and her work, she would always say, oh, I had a CETA worker. And CETA worker was somebody we would get through a government program to come in from high school to help you. And she'd say, she's doing some of that stuff. And I thought, okay, she was doing everything, Banker's Award, doing conservation, and just everything was perfect. And I thought, man, how's she doing that? Because we had to do taxes. And when I hired in, they didn't tell me I had to do bookkeeping. I knew how to keep a checkbook, and that was about the end of it. Well, you learned. And I never did change after all those years, and we had these people doing it on the computer. I still did a big old book, and it was just like my receipts, my disbursements, and a balance. But I remember thinking, how's she doing that? Because we had to pay unemployment tax, federal tax, state tax, do those quarterly reports, get them deposited, get them in. And she was telling me, oh, it's nothing. Well, then one day I get a call, and they had put a chain and lock on their door, and nobody could go in, and she had been put in a police car and escorted off because she was not paying those taxes, and her board was going to be scrutinized because they had not been paying their fines. Well, after that, guess what? All of us got scrutinized, and we better be doing it by the book, and they were investigating. And then I knew I was killing myself trying to keep up with her. She wasn't even doing it. So I was mad at myself. But a sweet girl. But we had 2 or 3 that did that kind of thing. They paid restitution and they got their dues. But I'm just saying, when you do something bad, you reflect on everybody else and you have to double up your work. So that was an experience I had.
So they didn't do training along the way?
Well, you know,
learned as you
we'll
went?
talk about that a little bit. They did. They would have us come to, I had a lady, Trying to think. Madge probably. She didn't, when she left, she had been here 23 years, Madge Springle, when I came. And no, I don't remember anybody but poor old Paul Hamilton really telling me what to do. He was a district conservationist. Later, they did ask us to come to Oklahoma City, but back then, that was a drive, for us. So we would have some training over in Oklahoma City. They called it orientation. And then we had a lady in our SES, Nancy Ellis, I think. No, there was a lady before her. Anyway, they would come and try to go over the SES stuff with us. And we had a guidebook, a handbook, and they'd send us bulletins telling us what to do. And if you needed something and you were bad, they would call you and you didn't have to worry. They would tell you what you're doing wrong. But then I remember one time, the funnest time that I ever remember, the Soil Conservation Service and the Conservation Commission pulled off a deal for all employees to come to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Everybody got a hotel room. I don't know whether I had to buddy with somebody or not, but they had competition, and you had to participate. It was like an Olympics, and I had hula hoop, and I won, and I was older than that girl, and I made sure my hips kept moving. I was not losing that hula hoop contest. I'll never forgot that. I couldn't hula hoop now if I wanted to, but they had swimming. They had relay racing, but we got so close during that event. And I know it cost money, but it made the attitudes of people so different. And they all come together and everybody, it was just fun. We ate, I remember, at some cotton, something, was there a dance hall, something cotton at Stillwater? Something cotton. Maybe, I don't remember. Anyway, we all ate out there and had barbecue, but I never forgot that. That was fun, and I remember thinking this brought everybody together when there was so much stress going on, and it was just fun.
That would have been about when?
Oh gosh, girl.
Just
I can hula hoop. It was a long time ago.
About when? In the 80s?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, at least, yeah. And then we had conservation days where we would have, and then we changed them to legislative days, where we would all go to the Capitol that could. We would meet in a big room, and the commission would have us hand out papers, and we would kind of all go over them as to what we needed to say to our legislators, why we need these funds. And it was really nice because you got to really know your representatives and senators on your level. They would take the time to sit down. They didn't promise you anything, but, and then we did that just about every year. Mm-hmm. And that helped us. And so then there became a young lady named Diane Ellers. She was at Grant County, and she said that we were going to do, and I don't know where she came up with the idea, about an Oklahoma Employees Association. Oklahoma Conservation District Employees Association. And she started telling me about it, and I said, I don't want no part of that. That's a union. I love my board, and I was not going to make them mad at me. And she said, oh, it's not. She said, it's just for us to get, I don't want any part of it. Well, it wasn't long after that, I became president of the Oklahoma Association Conservation District. And it was a great association, still goes on. The women, men, they're all invited as long as you're an employee and you pay your dues. And we started going to the legislators on our own because we wanted some benefits. I didn't know the first thing about talking to senators. And I remember we went into a big room and there was all of those. And I thought they just put their pants on like I do. So I tried to relax and think they're just like me. But they had the purse strings and I knew it. But they let us, after lots of pressure, we would take them little packets of sugar. And I'm trying to remember what that blue sugar says. We would use that as a gimmick. We would pass that in a coffee cup and a stir. Equal. We want equal pay for equal duties. Then we took them payday candy bars. And we want a payday for more money. we tried to leave them something that, like, we're worth a mint. We wanted them to know that we weren't going to give up, and we just kept going. And I think it was 1989, they finally gave us benefits. And when I say benefits, they gave us health insurance, they gave us longevity pay. Other state employees were getting it, but we were not considered a state employee. We worked for a state agency, but we were a board employee. We were a local employee. So for us to get that, that was a triumph. I mean, it was. And we still get them. And people, when I left, okay, the first year I got longevity pay, I got it after 2 years, it was $250. When I left, my check was $2,800. But you know what? That longevity pay made me stay. It made me be a better employee. I wanted to stay here. They were good to me. I had annual leave, sick leave. I had a health insurance plan. I even got that duck, Aflac, for a while. So, you know, I felt like the association finally accomplished something. They're still doing that. It wasn't me, it was all of us. It took everyone's diligence to stay on it and push, and it happened. But we had J. Barry Harrison was a senator, and I think he was from Pahaska, if I remember right. And he helped us too, because he was in the Senate and he knew what we were doing because he was serving on a board. So he already knew. You know, you asked me about women. I remember I had nothing but men really as district conservationist. And then I got Brandy Peets. And Brandy was a young girl. She was single, a sweetheart, knew she was going to advance. She did. She's now in western Oklahoma. Very good to work. I was nervous because women are mean to each other. I mean, they can be. So she was super good, easy to get along with. And we were doing probably at that time CRP, grassland program. We were doing wetlands protection. She was busy, but was kind to me, treated me with respect. I would have never thought I worked for a different agency. After Brandy, I had Brent Pinnell. Brent Pinnell was a black DC. Not that that matters, but I'm just saying he was my first one. And I love Brent like he was my baby boy. I think he'll be a state con someday. I tried to raise them to become important. I had Les Connor was one of my area resource conservationists. I had Mark Habiger. I always remember Mark because he wore pink shirts, and I thought that was brave for a man. But he had a temper too. I'm trying to think who else I had for ACs. I had Leroy Tull, Les Connor, Mark Habiger. And after Brandy, I had another, and then I had Brent. After Brent, I had another woman. I had, I think Tara was my next one, Tara Martin. Super sweet girl. She had a baby, and then she went to a different agency. Then I had Melissa Thompson. That was another lady. So the change was coming for women to step into a role that normally men were in. And Melissa still works for it in RCS. And then after that, I just started getting here and miss just an assistant to fill in until they decided what they were going to do. And when I left, I think I had Cord Caldwell, and I loved him. He's good looking, and I could say that because I was old, and so I could do all the flirting I wanted because I was old.
What about women on your board?
Oh, let's talk about that. Let's talk about Sherrod Parker was my first minority person. And he was the one that said, quit coming to see me. I'm happy. I don't need you all coming to see me. And so Sherrod was wonderful. I love Sherrod Parker. Then after that, I got Janet Froh as a board member, my first woman. Janet's, I don't want to tell this wrong. I think it was her grandmother was on the board in Caney Valley. Miss Reinhardt, I believe was her name.
First woman board.
First woman, right. So now I had Janet as the first woman. This year, Janet is, and then I come along on this board in 2019. And now Janet is the chairman of our board. So things have really, made a full circle. And I know she's so happy because she's kind of filling the role that her grandmother did. So that was good. And then I thought of something else. Oh, we also did dry fire hydrants. Do you remember that?
I do.
Where that farmers would have access to water in case of a fire. And it was through a grant program. And we also participated in Eastern Oklahoma Development District. We had a board member. There was sub-state agencies. And we would send a board member to those so that if we needed assistance in our county. And EODD is still in place, but I don't know if they call it EODD. But we were a member of that too. And I'm trying to think what else I wrote down to tell you all good stuff. Oh, I'll tell you a funny story. I remember our electricity went off one time, and Greg Kendall was my boss. He probably won't like me telling this, but it was funny. There was no power, so it was dark. I couldn't see, but we were in an open office, so I didn't want to sit there and twiddle my thumbs. So I went over to the girls, and at that time it was still ASCS, I think. And I said, do you have anything I can help you do? And they said, hey, we can stamp envelopes. I said, okay, because put your return address. He didn't have. So I sat there and I was stamping when Greg came out. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm helping them. I can't do anything else. I don't have any power. Can't type, can't see. He said, I'll be right back. He went home and got a flashlight and came back. And he said, go in there and file those maps. I said, with that flashlight? He said, yep, and I did. So that was a funny story. And then another funny story, this may not part of history, but it was funny, of what you go through as a secretary program. This guy walked in my office one day, and he had a feather and a bell hanging in his ear. So when he would talk, he had long hair, when he would talk, he'd ding. And he had this bird, and he set it on my desk, and he said, what's wrong with my bird? And I'm thinking, okay, this is conservation, not. And he said, what's wrong with that? And I said, he's dead. He said, no, he's not. And I said, sir, that bird is dead. No, he's not. Ding, ding, ding. And I said, I tell you what, you just write your little self right over there to the ASCS office and ask Jim Spear what he thinks wrong with that bird. So he did. And Jim came over there and he said, what are you doing? That bird was dead. I said, I told him that. He wouldn't believe me. I thought he'd believe a man more than he would believe a woman. And he took that bird out with that dead bird, and I don't know whatever happened to him. And then one day, I come back from work, and there was a man kind of crouched down behind the government truck. And he said, I think we ought to kill him. He kind of popped up, and he said, I think we ought to kill the president. I said, really? And he said, I said, I don't know about that. He said, and I'm trying to open the door to get in and trying to get Greg Kendall's attention. I'm saying, call the police. He's not hearing me. And the guy's still saying, I think we're going to kill the president. Okay. Finally, Greg comes walking up there, and I said, this man wants to kill the president. He said, well, call the police. I said, that's what I'm trying to get you to do. So he did. The police get there. He's gone. But they find him in Walmart, and he had come from the mental institution at Benita, I think is what they said. But they did get him. So there is danger when you're working and you don't know. One more funny story. This is funny. We did have fun. We worked, but we did have fun. One day I'm at work and I'm by myself. I answer the phone and the guy said, is Mr. Kendall there? And I said, no, sir, can I help you? And he gave me a man's number that was one of my cooperators. I remembered him. And I said, how can I help you? He said, well, I'm coming down there and I'm going to whip that Greg Kendall. It wasn't that nice of words, but he was going to come down there and whip Mr. Kendall. And I said, well, I don't know why you would do that. Well, he had done something to his pond, and he was going to come down there and he was going to whip him. I said, okay, I'll be expecting you. And I hung up. I called the area office because there was nobody with me, and I called. Nancy Ellis was the area clerk, and I told her what the man had said. And she said, lock the door. Just lock the door. And I said, Nancy, that door's for all of our agencies. She said, lock the door. I said, okay. So I told him we was going to lock the door because that man was, in just a minute my phone rang. I answered it. He said, Paula, Paula. I said, hello? Paula. I said, yes. That was me. He said, I said, who is this? This is Buddy Baker at the area office. And he said, that was just a prank. He said, don't tell anybody. He said, that was me. You can unlock the door and don't tell anybody. I said, Buddy, I'm going to kill you. Buddy was the area technician, I think was his title. And Buddy loved to play jokes on people. So that was his joke on me. Sometimes I would answer the phone and people would be saying, huh? And he had taped my phone underneath he had unscrewed the cap and put tape on it. He would let air out of your tires. He was just kind of ornery, but a good worker. I'm not taking away from his work, but that was his personality. And then one day, Alfred, my soil con, I loved Alfred. I called him Alfredo. He came in and he said, did you move my truck? He had a big old 3/4 ton diesel. And I had done that just for meanness because he'd leave the keys in it. And he said, where'd you park my truck? And I said, Al, I didn't move your truck. He said, Paul, my truck's gone. I said, well, I didn't do it. He said, you're kidding me. I said, you better call your wife. I said, she might have got it, but I didn't. She didn't get it. They found it in Texas with no wheels. And I said, that's what you get for leaving your keys in the truck all the time. So that was another fun thing. But work was good. People were good. They were putting conservation on the ground. Farmers came in. We had farmers all the time. You knew them by their first name. They knew you. It's still the same, but now we have walls up, windows. You can't come in. You lose that personal touch, I think. And it's sad that our country has got to that state because that one-on-one relationship is important and it's hard between glass. But I have so many good memories. And I'm glad I'm on the board because I can keep helping to make sure that those practices get put on the ground and now we're into cost share, big cost share for the state. And that's another thing through the legislation that our commission has worked hard and going to those conservation days to get that money to put on the ground. And we have received additional funds just this month. And we've already called our people that we have on a waiting list. And we're distributing that money to help with state cost share on ponds. And that's our main one. We've done fencing and we had grass establishment. So I'm still able to see that that's getting put on the ground and the farmers are still getting able. And they're our food source. I mean, if we don't have a farmer, we don't eat. I mean, they're important. Most important people probably when you think about it, because I like to eat. And I'm trying to think what else I was going to tell you.
Impaired waterways.
Say that again.
Impaired waterways.
We did waterways. Is that what
Are you
you're
talking about water quality now?
Water quality?
Well, I was just thinking about the TJ Love.
Oh, TJ, that's a different program. I love TJ. He's quite a mess. We just built him a pond. And he is very active in that new program, and I've got to think what it's called. I don't want to look stupid, but I'm going to because I can't think what it's called.
It's called CARE.
CARE, that's the CARE. And yes, he's very involved. And, I'm hoping someday he might want to be a board member. He would be a great asset because he's been there, he's done that, he knows too. And we need people with knowledge about how the programs work. And so that's a great project. I just couldn't think of the name of it, but CARE. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you're an ambassador for all of it.
I am. I love them all. I'm telling you, this is a family. I'll say that again. I used to tell my husband, oh, and by the way, my name has changed. If anybody asks, they'll think, who is that woman? I was Paula Waymark when I started. And unfortunately, that young man had some issues. Then I married again, and his name was Graves. And so my name became Paula Graves. And now I am Paula Templeton and have been for 34 years. I finally, God sent me the right one that could deal with me. But, I told him, if we're traveling and we break down, I said, we don't have to worry. I said, I got a friend in every county at a conservation district or an NRCS office That's the kind of people I work with. Or no, they'll come to your aid where other people might not. But you can count on that I can call one of them and they're going to help me. And so that career I had was not just stopped. It will go on as long as somebody's there.
Well, when you decided to retire,
Why?
yeah.
Because I was old and I was not doing computers well. And you asked about that training. I'm going to go back to that. They provided us with training. They encouraged us to take classes. But I guess I was just too old and I didn't think I could learn. And they were bringing in 2 screens for you on a computer. And I'm thinking, heck, I can hardly do one. And I just got, accustomed to using the keyboard. And I just think I was not doing the job that they needed for the mindset of younger people. And when you know it, you need to go. And my mom had told me, retire when you're 62, get that Social Security. And then somebody said, well, if you wait a little longer, then you can get, you can work as much as you want to. So I waited a little longer so I could let Uncle Sam know I'm going to make all my money I can. But, I retired in 16 and I was already selling real estate part-time. And I always felt like the commission thought, because I remember when I started working, there was a lady named Ruth, but I don't remember Ruth's last name, but she was a realtor. And I remember them talking about her, that she was doing 2 jobs and that wasn't right. So I was doing real estate part-time, mainly in the evenings and the weekends. And I remember a lady came up to me and asked me, I don't know, we were talking, and I introduced myself. And she said, oh, you're the weekend warrior. And I said, what? She said, you're the weekend warrior. And I said, on what? She said, real estate. She said, that's what the other realtors call you, is the weekend warrior. I said, well, that's a pretty good name. I'll take it. But I knew that I needed to be fair about that. I was very cautious. You'll have some people retire and they'll have the max of their retirement. Of their annual leave. I didn't. I probably didn't get paid for 100 hours because, and I'd been here 38 years, I didn't ever want to get caught out doing something that wasn't my job. So I made sure I had annual leave. Thank God for that. But I didn't ever want to cheat them. And if I thought there was any time I would get behind, I would stay here after board meetings. We started board meetings, they would start at 8 in the morning. Then they changed them till 10 in the morning because the farmers needed to get their work. Then they went to 8 o'clock at night. And I would stay until 10 o'clock after the meeting to get my minutes typed because I didn't want to get behind. And it was fresh on my mind. And I remember one night we had an 8 o'clock board meeting and they required the district conservationist to attend. Well, it was after his hours, And I remember Greg Kendall came and he had been mowing his yard and he wore a pair of shorts. I'll never forget that because clothing was important back then too. You didn't come in jeans and a sweatshirt. You dressed. They wanted you to look business.
Even the farmers?
No, just the employees.
The employees, okay.
But Greg came in shorts that night to the board meeting, and I can't remember who his AC was, but it happened to be the AC was there that night. And oh, did he get a reprimand for coming in shorts. And I thought, that's not right. It was after hours, but we are a reflection on who we work for. And so I try to remember that even though I don't work here, I'm a board member. So I certainly don't want to go out and do something because you know what the first thing they're going to say? Oh, Paula, she's on the board of the Conservation District. I don't want that reputation. So I think we need to all remember that we are a reflection to whatever we belong to. So we need to keep so I was cautious in real estate, but I love real estate and it's made me a good living after the Conservation District. And I don't have to do a lot of computer, but I love the people. And so I'm still getting out there to see my farmers. I didn't ever, during the time I worked here, I didn't ever sell any land because I felt like that would be a conflict of interest. And so I never did that. It was always houses because I wanted to do the right thing, and I didn't ever want Lisa off accusing me of doing something I wasn't doing. So I was cautious. And even after I retired, and I'm not saying this for a toot on the horn, but I loved it so much, I didn't want the next girl to come in and be behind. So I told the board, I'm going to come out and I'll just come maybe once in the morning, do the mail, check the emails, file whatever, and help you. And I did that for 2 months. And I thought, I'm giving back to them for anything that I might have ever abused. So one day I walked in, and I won't say who, the little girl was here filling in. And she said, oh, I got everything ready for the audit. Because I had left in, I think, April, and the audit was due in July. And I had everything ready, boxed up, ready to take to the auditor. That was, I'm going to talk about that just a minute. Audit, I'm sorry. The audit. Used to, when I first started, you know how we did an audit? I would take my books to a banker. He was a local banker, and he would review them, and we'd give him maybe $20. And he would write a letter and say that everything balanced. Now we pay an auditor like over $1,000 because, and when I would, I missed a big shot of my program. Abandoned mine lands. You let me forget that.
I did.
We did abandoned mine lands, and Mike Castle was over abandoned mine lands at the commission. And we had high hazard dams in Wagoner. That's where they had dug for the coal and left these big old pits. And so we were taking care of that through the abandoned mine land program. And we had a homeowner that he thought that was his lake on his property. And when we filled in that abandoned mine land program, he was not happy. I think he ended up suing us because we had taken away his lake, if I'm not mistaken. And so that program was wonderful because we had several people that had drowned swimming in those pits. And so that was a great program to have too. See, I almost missed important things. And we have Northeastern State up on, Creek Turnpike. Mm-hmm. That right in there was one of those areas that was an abandoned mine land program. Mm-hmm. And now it's all cleaned up and beautiful, and we don't have those sinkholes anymore, or the danger, because they were taken care of. In our district, we get the bid to do the Bermuda grass sprigging. And so that helped us make money. And I did payroll for the abandoned mine land program. And that was a funny story. I had a board member named Jerry McReynolds. Mr. McReynolds had came from California. They do things different in California than we do in Oklahoma, I'll say. And I'll never forget, we went to an area meeting, and I had asked the board if they wanted me to send them packets, and we had all decided, before the meeting, so they'd know. And they had all decided and voted, no, it's a waste of postage, and we will know when we get there and go over everything. Right in the middle of that area meeting, Mr. McReynolds stands up and says, what do we do if we can't get our secretary to send us packets? I thought, you voted not to. I was humiliated. I mean, everybody was there from the whole area. And I'm thinking, can you believe it? I cried, went to the bathroom, cried, and somebody said, ignore him. Well, then Mr. McReynolds on the AML program, they had said that they would pay the district 10% of the payroll for doing it. And Mr. McReynolds said, okay, that's good. He said, we'll have 10%. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, so you'll do the payroll? And I said, yes, sir, but I want to talk about that. He said, okay. I said, I would like a third of that. Dead silence. And my other board members didn't say a word either. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm going to be doing the work, and I want to be like a farmer. I'll give you 2/3, and I want a third. Why would we do that? I said, because I'm doing the work. And I'm thinking, oh boy, I've messed up bad. And he sat there a minute. He said, okay, but you do it on your own time. You cannot do it during our work hours. I said, for real? He said, that's right. So I would come after work, and I'd work from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock, doing the AML payroll so I could get my third of that money. And I bought a grandfather clock. I'll never forget that. I wanted a grandfather all my life. So I bought me a grandfather clock. And you know, he mellowed out as time went on. He kind of caught on that we all weren't California. And he had a nice farm. And I really don't know what happened to Mr. McReynolds. I think he might have went back to California. I'm not sure. But anyway, I'll end on that we had a great relationship with all my crew, no matter what. And we did a lot of great things during my 38 years in Oklahoma.
Well, at what point did the office become walls? I mean, it's not
Yeah.
completely open now. Or is it a different, or
no,
is it a
I
different
guess
building?
they didn't think it worked because now after, I can't remember. I was probably out here, I'm going to guess, 5 years. So probably around 2010, we moved out here. A young man owned this property and he built the building. I tried to get my board to buy a building. They would not hear of it. They didn't want to take that chance. Well, this has probably been paid for 5 times now because a lot of districts were buying buildings that they didn't want to. And so he built this and the walls went up and that's the way it was. But for instance, the little lady that was hateful to me the very first day, I found out she had been hateful to the woman who was there before me. So it just kind of carried over. So one day I decided, okay, I prayed about it and I went over to her and I said, Elvira, I don't know why you don't like me, but I want to apologize if I've done something to harm you. And I told the ASS girl I was going to do that. She said, don't do it. Don't do it. But she would invite everybody to lunch in the back but me. And she'd have nice ham and beans, and I wanted some. But she didn't know me. I was new. And so I go over there with my ploy, I'm sorry, I don't know what I've done, but I'm asking for forgiveness. She said, I don't want to be friends with you. I said, okay. And I went out the back door, walked around, cried, came back. Phil said, I told you not to do it. I said, I know you did, but I had to try. But everybody knew everything in there. And I remember one day, Jack Huggins was the FHA supervisor. And these big men came in. And he wasn't there, thank goodness. And they had come to whip him because he had not given his mother the right funds or something for winterization of her house. And she told him he'll be back and told him when. And I thought, how can you do that to him? So I warned him. I called him and I said, they're going to be here and I'm telling you, they're mean and they're bad. And I thought she was just like that. She either liked, and she didn't like him. So that was just her personality. So maybe being open, they realized that you needed privacy for people, not to be told, you want to sleep in your car? So I think that's what.
Was she a member of the OACDE?
No, she was not. She was an FHA employee. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, the funny story on that. Oh, this girl, we probably quit now, but this girl worked for her part-time. And Lisa, and she'd be mean to Lisa too. And Lisa liked me and I liked her. And so one day, Lisa walked over and she'd shoot her out about something. Lisa said, you got something in your hair. And she went to pull it. It was a wig. It pulled the whole wig off and she was fine to pull everything back on. And I thought, you're getting your pay. That's what you get for being so mean. Anyway.
And I read in 2008 you were inducted into the Conservation Hall of Fame as friend of conservation.
A friend of conservation.
And
Was that a surprise?
Was nice. It was a big surprise. And my husband, I don't remember how, but somebody told him to come. But I didn't know he was coming. And he broke down on I-40, 240, whatever that road is, I-40. Somebody stopped and changed his tire. And he barely got there and he walked in and said, what are you doing here? He said, don't ask me. He said, I've had a horrible trip. But I didn't know it. And that was such, there was people that were smart, better people than I. So it was really an honor. Yeah. It was.
One of the many highlights. It
Many,
sounds-
many. I've had a good life.
Look at your list, Ben, and make sure we've covered what you want.
She has.
Did I get it all? I'm good for you. Well, I love it. It's the truth. And the truth's easy to talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to think if there's anything else I missed. Oh, I did. Farm shows. We went to the farm show. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
We did the farm shows. Yeah. And we would always be there and try to help our farmers if they needed anything. We were busy. When I thought back, I thought, man, we did do a lot more than I thought we did.
Was it 8 to 4:30 or was it?
We took shifts.
Oh.
We would take, you mean working here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were 8 to 4:30. And we'd get 30 minutes for lunch. Well, that was almost impossible. So people probably lied about that because you couldn't eat in 30 minutes unless you brought your lunch. And my mom would always come pick me up for lunch most of the time. And we'd drive around and look at houses, even back then before I was a realtor. And I would drive by and look, and I'd say, "Ooh, we'll go back tomorrow and look at that one." So one day I'm in her pickup. I ran a stop sign, and the policeman stopped me, and I said, "Yes, sir, I did. I'm sorry. I did. I'm not going to lie." Well, he didn't give me a ticket. The next day we were in her old Cadillac, and I did the very same thing. It was the very same police officer. And he said, "Ma'am, have we met before?" I said, "Mm-hmm." He said, "Yesterday?" I said, "I'm sorry." And he didn't give me a ticket. So I was very cautious from then on to stop. But she would come get me for lunch. And I look back, my mom made fried pies, apricot fried pies, the best you could ever eat. And Greg and I would talk and say, "We need some fried pies." I would call her. And that woman, she must have already had the apricots ready. She would make us all fried pies and bring them to us.
Wow.
But I guess, and I look back, Paul Hamilton, he was my first DC. He just passed away last year. He fell, I guess, off of what I was told was he was trimming a tree and fell, and he died. And then Don Harkey, who worked with me in ASES, he just passed away this past couple of months. He had cancer. Jerry Walker, he worked with me. He passed away. So to be alive, I'm pretty happy. And I'm 73, so I'm walking on, what do you call that? Holy ground, I guess. I'm going to be careful. But I lost a lot of people that were good to me and helped form who I am.
So and this all goes back to your friend that suggested you.
Yeah, did I apply for a job? And let me tell you what else she did. She fixed me up with my husband. And he's been 34 years,
Wow.
so that was good.
Very good for you.
Yeah, she was, and she's gone. So, and Mr. Lancaster was what they called one of the Magnificent Seven.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Lawrence Drake was one of them. Yule Lancaster, Ward Perryman. There was 7 of them, and they called them the Magnificent Seven. And I thought how proud I was to have been hired by somebody that really, because he started on the board in 1938. That's a long time ago. He had a vision. They all 7 had a vision. And there was, what was the guy's name that was the first state, I know his name, that started,
OACDE?
no, soil conservation.
Hugh Hammond.
Hugh Hammond, yeah, they had a vision. Thank you. Yeah. Where would we be if we hadn't had people? So for people to say, "Well, I don't know if anybody will ever believe what I think," well, they will.
Yeah.
You just have to take the horse by the bridle and take off. So, but I've learned a lot, and I hope I pass it on.
Was there any point where you thought, "Oh, I think I've had enough. I want to
Quit?
Yeah. Back then?
No, I only quit whenever that girl, I didn't finish that story, when I was coming in and not getting paid, and I'm thinking, okay, I've been doing this 2 or 3 months. I can't remember how many months I did it, but I was thinking, okay, when I left, my salary was $2,000 net. I took home $2,000 or $21, and I remember thinking, okay, if I've ever cheated them out of anything, I'll give it back. I've been coming out here every day doing this, trying to be good and be helpful. And I walked in and that girl said, because I had the audit ready, that's where I left y'all all go. And she said, "You can't get on the computers anymore." I said, "Do what?" She said, you can't get on the computers anymore. They don't want you. I said, oh. And I stood there a minute, and she said, you're not allowed to come back in here. You don't work here anymore. I said, really? I said, well, you know what? You finished taking all that stuff to the auditor. And I walked out, and I went home, and oh, my little heart was broke. And I remember, I think I called George, bless his heart. He took the chewing. And I said, don't you ever call me again or ask me for any help, because that was not right. I said, somebody should have said that in a different way than the way they did it. I said, I was doing that for free. And I said, I'm telling you what, after 38 years, I'm done with you all. I was hurt. So my husband, the good old boy he is, he said, now you better think about that. You don't know who told that girl that. You don't know if she was saying it the way it was supposed to be said. I said, don't matter. I want to talk to him. George tried to call me. I wouldn't answer. And I don't know. I guess God kind of just touched my heart and said, don't be like that. And I came back.
They asked you to come back to the board, or you
Nope.
decided?
I'll tell you what happened on that. You remember that man that I said was always saying that he was discriminated against? Okay, I don't remember who told me, but I knew they were going to have a position on the board. And they said that he was kind of backing this person to get onto our board, to the Wagoner board. And I said, what? I said, we don't want him doing that. And that lit a fire on me. And I filled out the paperwork to be a board member. And I thought, oh boy, he's got money, because they started putting her name and everything on a marquee. I mean, they were going, and I never had an election in 38 years when I was here, ever.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh, this is serious. So I thought, I can't pay for that board. It was $300 a month or something to put your name. So I just got on the telephone. And all those farmers that had come in to see me, I called them and I said, hey, this is Paula, and I'm going to run for the position on the district board. And I hate to tell you this, but you're going to have to take your time to go vote. And I know people don't like to vote if it's not a presidential election or whatever. I said, but there will be a precinct open, and I need you to go if you want me to be on this board. If you don't, that's fine. But if you believe I'll do what I'm supposed to do, I need your vote. I did that to every farmer in Porter, OK, Wagoner, Coweta that I knew. So the night my husband said, are you crazy? Why do you want to do this again? I said, I don't want anybody hurting that board. And I thought, if that man is involved, it's going to be trouble. And I don't want that. He said, well, what are you going to do if you don't win? I said, I gave it my best shot. So that night, I couldn't hardly stand it. You know, you don't want to do something and fail. So I made him drive me to Porter, because they had to post the votes on the window. So we drove to Porter, to Coweta, to Wagoner, and I said, hot dog. I did it. So, and I wouldn't have if I'd known another man was going to run. There was a gentleman named White, and he threw his hat in after I did. And he would have been a good board member. But I thought, I did it. I'm going to serve, and I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. So that worked. That's how it happened.
And how often will you have to rerun, or are you on
I think it's
until you
every 2
decide?
years. Every 2 or 3. I've done it. I've already done one. Nobody opposed me, so I was good. Yeah. So I'm on my second term. And I'll stay till I croak, I guess, or till they say, out of here. And you know, we have Mr. Harmon is a board member now, Ben Harmon. Ben Harmon is probably, I think he told me he's 84. And yet he said, I want you to be chairman. I said, I said, we need to let Janet, because she's been a board member longer, and I knew how important that is for her. Mm-hmm. You know, it was important for Janet, and she's a good woman, and she's so worried she's going to mess up, and she's doing a great job. And then Ben went out and recruited a young man from Tallahassee, and he's wonderful. He works for Oklahoma Natural Gas, and he's young. And so he replaced one that we lost. When we lost George went off due to Alzheimer's. And that's a sad thing because George is so smart. And he just got to where he was repeating, and I love him. And so he's come on. And then JW is probably 85, and he's in poor health, and he still comes. He called us last week and said he took a pain pill, and we said, do not come. And he drove anyway. But he was there, and he was paying attention. And so we have, and I'm 73, so I won't stay that long because I don't want to not be useful and doing what you're doing. And we all want to do, as we get older, we think we can, but we can't. So we need to move on and let younger people take in. So I'm going to start looking for my replacement.
I mean, they're all dedicated.
They are.
All dedicated.
All of them. Anybody that gives their time, hopefully they're not there to be an agenda. But everybody I've ever worked with here has never had a hidden agenda. They've really been, and that's what I didn't want to see happen. And I thought I might lose because he put out the money to get that election. And I thought, ooh. But because of the people that you worked with and you treated right, they remembered and they voted. So that meant a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Anything else?
Nope.
My last question
Yes, sir.
then is, when history is written about Paula, what do you want it to say? How do you want to be remembered?
Oh my. That she really cared about the land, that she wanted to be a good steward, and that she loved the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you liked a good laugh.
I do.
Well, thank you very much for
Thank
sharing.
you. Thank you.